everyone. Welcome to the Stanford MBA Program panel focused on students and alumni from Africa. Thank you all so much for joining. My name is Saba Khan. I'm a member of the Stanford MBA Admissions Office. All right, I think we are waiting for a couple of additional alumni to join us, but in the meantime, want to get started with some introductions for those panelists who are on the call now. Tayo, do you want to kick us off just a little bit about yourself, and would also love to hear about your favorite academic experience at Stanford?
Sure, I appreciate it. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for joining on. And it's great to be here again. Good to see you again, Saba and Ron. So my name is Tayo Viosu, and I am the founder and group CEO of Paga, a mobile payments company here in Nigeria. I'm class of 2005 at the GSB. And even though that's been a while, it doesn't feel that way. What was my favorite experience? I would say the class that really stands out to me, and I feel like I use this every day, is Managing Growing Enterprises with Joel Peterson. And it's because this was a class where every single session you had a small case study, and you came to class and you role played it. And it wasn't I think I will do X. No, you actually acted it out. And you went back and forth with various team people in the class. And at the end of the class, you know, for the last, call it 15 minutes or so, you have the protagonist of the case actually there. And who's been watching this thing diligently and then now chimes in about what actually happened and what we did in class. I feel like my life as an entrepreneur is all about managing growing enterprises, and every day there's a new challenge. There's something different that comes up that I have to address. So that has stayed with me quite a lot.
Awesome, thanks. Ron, would you like to go ahead?
That's tough to follow. My name is Ron Otamale. I'm also class of 2005 with Tayo. I was actually a bit apprehensive about joining this because I was thinking to myself, how much can I add given that I'm 15 years removed? Seems like yesterday, but it's really a long time ago. But then I saw Tayo on the list, who's a friend and a fellow classmate. I said, I guess I won't be the only old person here. I'm based in Johannesburg. I run a private equity firm called Affirma Capital, which is 1 year old. It was the former private equity firm under Standard Chartered Bank, and we acquired it a year ago. The partners acquired the business a year ago. My favorite class, there were so many at the GSB, my favorite academic experience was a class called Investment Management. I think that was or Investing, and it was taught by Professor McDonald. And basically the class was, people called it a speaker session, although I didn't view it that way. They just brought in people from different walks in terms of investing. When you think about the investing world, you may think only private equity or only VC, but I mean, they brought in people from the VC world, the private equity world, family offices, anybody that invests money, whatever that looks like. And it was quite interesting to just see people's approach on how you do that. And the most amazing speaker we had in that class was Charlie Munger, who is at the time Warren Buffett's partner in Berkshire. And I think at the time when he came to speak to us, he was about 80 years old. And he was even in a wheelchair. But to sit here and seeing this is one of the best investors in the world, sitting there speaking to our class very casually, and how humble he was, that was quite amazing for me.
Awesome, thanks. Diffo, thanks so much for joining. We're just doing quick introductions. So a little bit about yourself, maybe where you're calling in from, and then your favorite academic experience at Stanford. And you're on mute. It's the Zoom life these days.
Yes, it's the most common line, I think, in meetings these days. So my name is Zipho Sikakane. I'm calling in from Johannesburg. I'm from South Africa and also currently based in South Africa. So I'm glad to be part of the conversation today. So I'm the CEO of EMZ Advisory. So it's a company I started a couple of years ago after I left business school. And, you know, we help a lot of organizations become effective, become more productive, looking at leadership, change management, culture, etc., and working across with different multinationals that are, you know, focusing on emerging markets, more particularly South African context, and across the board. So I'm GSB 2014. It feels like long ago. So, so very, very glad to be seeing some older but familiar faces from the Stanford community. And I think for me, you know, the thing that stands out, I think if I just look back at my favorite time, the thing that really stands out for me is just, I was really just impressed with, you know, some of the professors. I mean, just wow, just not so much, you know, yes, of course, there's the experience and there's the expertise, but it's just the level of care and the passion that they had in really helping us figure out our journeys, right? And really find out what our why is, what our impact is going to be, what our parts are going to be. And just seeing that coming from the heart is something that really, really stood out for me to this day. So that's the input from my side.
Awesome, thanks. And Josh is joining us as a current student. So Joshua, feel free, introduce yourself and maybe your favorite academic experience so far.
Hi everyone, I'm Joshua. It's an honor following those who have gone before me, and it's nice meeting all of you. Very happy to be able to join you today. I'm calling from my dorm room in Stanford, California, which you can see is this masterpiece behind me. As to my favorite academic experience, I will confess that I was taking notes when Tayo and Ron were listing their classes, because they just opened the class registration portal, and so I definitely will take those classes now. I'd say that in my first year, I will lean more technical. I gained the most from the optimization and simulation modeling class. Coming from a background where I was thinking more disease or opening bodies for a living, it was nice to be able to tell stories with numbers. And OSM concretized that for me. So I think it's a skill that I'm currently using in my internship, and I think that it will serve me for many years to come.
Awesome. Thanks so much. All right, I'm gonna actually stop sharing this background slide. It looks like maybe we missed out on a couple of panelists, but no worries there. I'm gonna switch so everyone can see the panelists, and I'm gonna start taking questions from those of you who are on the call and joining us today. So feel free to submit questions via the Q&A chat. You can also upvote questions with a thumbs up. So actually the first question I can answer, which is asking about the Africa Fellowship Program, and is that something that will be reinstated? So we actually did conclude that program last year. And so we don't have plans to reinstate that fellowship, but I really want to just emphasize how generous our need-based financial aid is. So part of the reason that we concluded the program is that we actually revamped all of our need-based financial aid. So on average, each student with the highest need is receiving significantly more financial aid than they previously used to. We kind of redid our algorithm. There are also alternative scholarship programs out there, including at Stanford, including the Knight Hennessy Scholars Program. So I would really just encourage everyone who's considering Stanford to throw your hat in the ring. And once you get in, everyone will have access to financial aid funding opportunities. We've got another question here asking, let's see. I was curious to know how students from Africa connected in kind of an international program. So were there any kind of cultural either barriers or challenges to adapting to an American MBA program? And this is a question coming from South Africa, just kind of talking about international culture and potentially any just challenges coming from Africa in particular. Maybe 2 or 3 of you could chime in on this one.
Okay, I guess I can take that since I'm freshest off the block. So I think 2 days after I landed on campus, there was this event where someone, well, spoke to us or spoke to the people gathered and said there's a policy that everyone at Stanford, I think, abides to or abides with, which is assuming best intentions. And I found that to lead to, let's call it an open mind, so to speak, which came in very handy when it came to processing what I'd considered the change in circumstances or the change in environment. And I think that is actually very critical to enjoying or making the best of the experience outside your home zone or your comfort zone. The second is, I think Stanford has been very intentional about creating a community, both amongst international students and between international and domestic students, and generally even between faculty and staff. And not just the intentionality, but also I think there's actually some science to the way it is done. I actually think it's very effective. And so I would say that at least amongst my classmates, I think that many people were able to acclimate quite easily and very effectively.
Nice. Any other thoughts? All right. We have another question coming in asking specifically about our West Coast location in the US. And, we all know that just geopolitically, that's a big distance from Africa compared to maybe some of our East Coast schools or European schools. And the question is, how has GSB helped you make an impact in Africa, given the school is based on the West Coast?
I would like to take that first, please. I always say this, and I've been on the continent post GSB for 12 years now. And my story is probably slightly interesting because my parents were immigrants to the US from Uganda. I moved to the US when I was very young, 4 years old. My whole life, I grew up in the US. And I'd never really been back to Africa since I was 3 or 4. When going into the GSB, my plan, or what I had in my mind, I was always interested in coming back to the continent and actually being an investor on the continent. Remember, a place I had left when I was 4 years old. And my whole family's in the States. So the GSB actually was very instrumental in what I do now, and actually me relocating and leaving my family, which is actually, again, in California and San Diego to be specific, to move to Johannesburg 12 years ago. And it was actually a lot of my classmates, a lot of my peers and the people above us, people like Tayo. There's a gentleman named Chinezi who started a school named Pioneer Academies, who was my roommate at the GSB. There's a gentleman named Fred Swanica, who most of you guys will know, started ALA. These were all, so my move was actually a lot of it from my network and the GSB networks, first and foremost. Secondly, having been on the continent for 12 years, I always make the following. The GSB is smaller than some of the other schools, but its impact on the continent is actually phenomenal. What GSB alums are doing on the continent, they punch well above their weight. I mean, Tayo with founding Paga, myself with founding Affirma Capital. I just told you, Chinese with Nova Pioneer, Fred. I mean, Zipo's on here. There's so many of us. I mean, there's so few of us having huge impact on the continent. So I would not shy away from saying I'll rather be on the East Coast of the country or the West Coast of the country. And then finally, in terms of a location and the beauty of the of where Stanford is, I think you'll be doing yourself a disservice not going there. And maybe I'm speaking out of as a California person, but it's an amazing place.
Yeah, I mean, I totally echo what Ron just said, and there's a lot behind, that you can even unpack on this, right? When we were in school, I remember calling, looking at the alumni database, and there was really one or two alums in Nigeria. In fact, and one of them, I just called him out of the blue, and got engaged. But now here in Lagos, in Nigeria, we have at least 15 GSBers. And he told me something, the alum that was there then told me something which is so true today, is that every alum of any business school who's on the African continent knows Stanford Business School, respects the degree, probably applied, maybe they didn't get in or something, right? Just to keep it clear, like Stanford has one of the lowest admission rates. And open doors for you, right? So they treat you just like you went to their school, right? So you get the access regardless. People know the brand, there's access there. For me, Stanford has been instrumental to my business. I have on our cap table 13 GSB alumni from 5 different classes on our cap table. These are investors in my business, people I didn't go to school with, but because of the tight knit of that network, have also invested in my business. And so I've seen significant value from the GSB. And I think across all schools, I would argue that the GSB has now, invested probably, as much as any other school in terms of its focus on Africa, and its desire to not only recruit directly from here, but actually be present, right? With what's going on in Ghana with Seed, in Kenya as well, with Seed, and helping entrepreneurs who didn't even go to Stanford Business School as well with their businesses, and having a lot of impact across the continent overall. So I would not worry about the distance. It is a long trip. I was supposed to be, actually Ron and I were supposed to be in San Francisco around now, and it's a long trip, but aside from that, it's well worth it.
Awesome, thanks. We have a related question actually from a couple of different people about why Stanford, which I think is kind of similar, but maybe Zippo and Josh, you could chime in on that one specifically, especially if there were any points to consider from an African perspective, but even generally kind of why Stanford versus other schools.
Yeah, absolutely. I could go ahead on that one just to get us started. The question is why Stanford and why not Stanford? I think, Ron was already mentioning, I mean, it's phenomenally beautiful, by the way. The weather's great, which makes a really big difference, especially some of us coming from the warmer side of the world. The winters there actually, they pretty much, if not the same, if not warmer than what we feel in South Africa. So it's a beautiful place. It's really great. It's really good energy. I used to say to people, there's all the stereotypes about California, particularly the good ones, they're all true, right? It's just people are really free. It's a place of opportunity. There's literally no judgment. You can be whoever you want. So I really like that. I think the second reason for me is that we were talking about how long the trip is. It is actually far. You actually take 2 really, really long flights. And for me, it's such an opportunity, right? I mean, leaving a place like that, I mean, some of my closest friends, right? Just because the class is so small, it's also so intimate, and you almost get to know everyone by name by the time we get to the end of the program. So some of my closest friends, literally people I talk to regularly, I mean, they're based in the US, they're based in Brazil, you know, they're based in other parts of Africa, they're based in Europe, they're based in China. I mean, I was literally dancing at a wedding in January in India because it was of a close friend, and, you know, 20 of us or so from different countries were sort of on the program. For me, that's something that is really, really hard to get, for example, in general, etc. And I think one of the things that's sort of nice about Stanford is just access to such a community of people and really getting to know them well at an intimate level. I mean, some of them I even know their families visit me, and it's as if it's like home, and vice versa. And I think the other thing that for me made Stanford really, really stand out, particularly, you know, that the essay, you know, that's part of the application, you know, what matters to you and why. I mean, it wasn't just something that was on paper, but it's something that I felt like I really lived. For me, the experience really challenged me to be, you know, what is the best leader that I can become? What's the best version of me that I can become? And I really felt like I left having found what is my why, and what's the impact I can have in the world, not defined by anyone else, not painted by anyone else. It was not influenced by any stereotype about, you know, what a leader is supposed to be. You know, someone like me, I've been an entrepreneur since I was young, right? But I spent years in corporates working in different countries, and I could not really see how I could make it happen. And then when I was at Stanford, I mean, we had, you know, entrepreneurs, business owners, all these people from, you know, some really young ones, really recent, all the guys that are the trailblazers today. And you have also some old school guys. And you see all these waves of individuals coming to tell you their own real life stories. And I saw myself, you know, that there's actually different ways of becoming whatever you want to become, you know, whether it's an entrepreneur or not. That for me is the main thing that stood out, and it still stands out today. So as my business, you can imagine with pandemic, you know, we've all had to reform, we've had to change how we do things. I mean, my biggest advisors are actually my classmates from business school. I was just talking to one before this call. She was in the morning in the US, it was evening for me. And, you know, she was actually giving me some guidance because she's worked with a lot of leaders running businesses in emerging markets, as an example. And I wouldn't have an opportunity like that if I hadn't had a chance to go to Stanford, and et cetera, et cetera. And I interact with them for different things. And even the other one, I mean, I see a lot of businesses from an investment perspective, angel stage. And, you know, a lot of my investment, one of them was a roommate in business school. He's studying an airline in Nigeria. You know, another one is in Nigeria, also studying, doing something in fintech. And then, of course, the education example that was already mentioned that's growing across the continent is also another Stanford alumni. So I just feel like for me, those are opportunities that I honestly would not have had if I didn't have access to that network.
Awesome. Josh, you're on mute.
Yeah, yes. Zoom live here. So I'll go next. I echo a lot of what Zifo just said. And specifically for me, who was in healthcare and academia before I began to look for a way to scale solutions, which is why I decided that I needed a working knowledge of finance, which is why I decided I needed an MBA. I decided that the best school for me would be somewhere where it was okay to try and fail. Because I obviously was going to be pivoting careers, but not just that, I was going to be trying out what I'd consider competencies and skills that are maybe sometimes not transferable or directly transferable. I was going to be trying them in new sectors. I wasn't even sure what that sector was. And as I read up on the profiles of all the schools, it seemed like Stanford was a place where previous failures were even worshipped, not just accepted. It was like, as long as you learn from it, it's a wonderful experience. So that actually solidified Stanford for me. Secondly, I believe in something, a concept one of my mentors taught me a few years ago, something called intrapreneurship, which is basically applying entrepreneurship mentality to structured engagements and organizations. And the more I read up on the profiles of people who, had done exploits post-Stanford, especially in Africa, the more I saw a lot of those concepts, expressed in what it is that they did and the way they went about problems. And I decided, well, I want to be like those people. And so there was that. I'd say also another major reason, well, other than the fact that Stanford is known for multidisciplinary learning, which has always attracted me, was immediately after my interview, and I spoke to my interviewer. I think that is the nicest interview I've ever had in my life. It was literally like licking ice cream. I was like, any school that had this guy, I'm definitely going to that school. So. And I genuinely think most alumni from Stanford are actually very warm, very nice, very helpful people who are always trying to be the teapot in your life, just pour into you. So that's why Stanford.
Yeah. Can I build on what you just said there? 2 points I'll make. One, just on that last point that Joshua just made, the fact that the business school has a non-grade disclosure policy really enables you to be okay with failure, right? It's about learning for really learning, right? And what it does is it takes away the competition amongst ourselves, right? You literally, before any exam, you have people who are really good at the topic, teaching the others, right? And getting you ready for the same exam that you're taking. And you're graded on curves, right? And it still doesn't matter, right? Like, you still do that. You come into, you come out of an interview or you're about to go into an interview and people actually tell you, oh, this is the tough questions that were asked, right? Because it's about let the best person get it, but about being collegial and helpful. So then the second thing I would say is, look, at any business school, any of the top business schools, I think you get a fantastic education. But I think what is really different about Stanford is the approach to leadership and the approach to the pedagogy, right? So, leadership is really around, leaders knowing yourself. So there's a lot of coursework structured around you getting to know yourself as a human being, as a person. And if you become a better person, you're a better leader. And then there's also a lot about, experiential learning, which I think is very different, right? So really putting yourself into the situation rather than just book learning, right? And I think those are two things that are very different about Stanford, compared to other schools.
Yeah, awesome. Great points. I hear that over and over again from alums all over the world, for sure. Aisha, it looks like you were able to join. I'm going to ask you to unmute if you feel ready to do a quick introduction. We've asked each of the panelists just to share a minute or two about your background, and then we also asked everyone to share a little bit about your favorite academic experience. And I will also go back to sharing screen to show you just kind of our panelists' backgrounds while you introduce yourself.
Okay, hi everyone. Sorry I'm late, I'm actually sitting in the car, but it's all good, I managed to make it in the end. I guess I was class of 2017, so my background, studied in the UK, I'm a Stanford undergrad, so Stanford for life, so I'm extremely biased. So I'm currently in Nigeria. I recently founded a startup, which is a dairy company working with smallholder farmers here in Abuja. And it's been quite the journey. And I guess some of the other question was, what was my best academic experience?
Yes. Yeah.
So MG is a class that that's managing growing enterprises. That's a class that I keep coming back to over and over again. It's incredible how much my notes and some of the kind of checklists and cheat lists and things like that that we got from. So I took MGE with David Dodson, and it was by far one of my best classes at the GSB. And really, it served as a guide as I've started a company, as I'm building a team, as I'm thinking about, you know, forming a board and just making really difficult decisions. It's just been incredible just being able to refer to those notes and really being able to kind of now see some of those cases that we went through and go through those experiences and being able to take away those discussions and remember some of the things we talked about. So yeah, I'm still amazed at how much I taught.
Awesome. All right, it looks like we've got some slight tech difficulties. Oh, there you go. You're back. Sorry, you froze for 1 second, but I think we heard your MGE answer, which is great. All right, I'm going to go back to taking some questions from those of you who are on. So we have one question that was around timing and how you knew that it was the right time for you in your MBA. The specific question was, would you have done it earlier or later in your career? But maybe like 2 or 3 of you could just chime in on how you thought about timing.
I again feel like that question is best suited to me, being fresh off the block. So I am one of the more experienced students at Stanford. So I guess having had work experience and maybe previous postgraduate education, so it was a bit of a dilemma for me, deciding whether that boat, the MBA boat, had sailed, because I think I began to see the need for an MBA in my life at least 3 or 4 years ago. I had maybe toyed with the idea earlier when looking at postgraduate education, but I thought it was far off field. However, I decided it was, let me rephrase that. I decided that as long as you are still thinking about it, it is the right time. Once it's not a recurring thought in your mind and stuff like that, then maybe it is probably of lower value to you. And so the fact that it kept coming and, well, at least altering my consciousness, I thought, even if it seemed, of course, now if you go on all of those websites and all of those blogs, they'll tell you, oh, once you are past a particular age, once you're past a particular level of experience, you can't get into an MBA, you might as well just go and do this and cool. But I decided to try, and well, I guess I'm here now. So I guess to those who are thinking about, is it the right time? I probably can't speak to those who maybe are thinking, oh, I don't have enough work experience. I'll let someone who maybe applied much earlier in their career speak to that. But for those who are thinking of applying as experienced, in quote, students, I'd say that this time is the right time. Apply now.
No, that's great. I guess I'll come in next. I applied after 2.5 years of work experience. So out of undergrad, 2.5 years of work experience, and then I applied. So when I got to the GSB, I had 3 years of work experience. For me, although I wasn't quote unquote switching industries, I was already in finance. I was trying to, I had this itching bug in me of doing investing and doing it on the continent. I always had this, that's something I wanted to do. However, I also needed to learn more about myself. And I think one of the panelists has said this. And I think going to the GSB allowed me, one, to take that time, to take the 2 years. I think I was on the younger side of my classmates. not the youngest by far. They're much younger. There were some that came straight out of undergrad. But it also allowed me that 2 years to interact with your classmates, and especially the classmates from the continent or have lived on the continent, to really think about the plan that I had in mind. And so, again, I came at a much younger part of it, but it was to me a way to get away for 2 years, really test the theory I had in my mind, and also get to speak to people that were more experienced, and specifically in the industry I was trying to get in, which is the private equity side of things, and also to engage with my classmates, both the people in my class, the people in the class above me, and then the people in the class below me in doing that. So it was some way of a career switch per se, in terms of geography, but not necessarily in terms of what I do day to day.
Great. We do have a lot of questions. Well, first, let me just add to that, because there is another really specific question that someone's asking that's gotten a few other votes too, and it's about having more advanced career trajectories. So there's someone asking like, hey, I have 13 years of industry experience. Is this too late or disqualifying? And it's absolutely not. So I think Josh kind of spoke to this already, but I think, you know, was probably close to a decade, maybe more, since undergrad, when he joined the GSB. And typically the range of students is everywhere from, like Ron said, some people are at 0 coming straight out of college, and others, you know, almost every single class has people with more than 10, 12, 15 years of work experience. So it is a really diverse class. The middle 50% of the class typically has 4 to 6 years, but that still means, you know, a quarter of the class has more than 6 years of experience. So I just wanted to address that person specifically, since it seemed like there were some other folks that had related questions about that. So one of the most popular questions right now in the Q&A is actually about the application process. So as an admissions officer, I always like to quarterback these questions first with a little public service announcement. So one, I would say there are actually lots of ways to get to know more about the application process and admissions criteria and what we're looking for. So feel free to sign up. If you take a look at our events page, we have information sessions happening weekly that speak directly to that. But the specific question that Ahmed is asking is, what's one thing that you wish you knew during the application process that you know now, and in hindsight wish you had known at the time you had applied? So I don't know if that specifically applies to application advice necessarily. It could be something you learned about Stanford, but just using hindsight, is there anything you would have liked to have known about at the time you applied?
Oh, I can give it a start on that one. It's a very difficult question. So it's clearly come from someone who's highly intelligent on the other side. But because if I look back, I think for me, if I think of the biggest wake-up call actually, I actually was just surprised about how much growth I achieved from the application process itself, because it really, really forces you to introspect. I'm very grateful for the people who I spoke to and asked for help. And all they said to me is, you know, make sure it's you, you know, invest time in you, make sure that this is the best reflection of you. And that for me was one of the biggest benefits, because all the months I spent on it was probably one of the biggest growth periods of my life. So now what I say to people is I say, you know what, actually just focus on the application as much as you can, because the growth alone is absolutely priceless. So if I could go back and change one thing, I would have actually spent more time. I would have actually spent more into introspection, because in hindsight, it was literally one of the biggest growth moments in my life. And yes, I grew a lot in the MBA itself, but before the MBA, that was literally probably the biggest growth moment. And it really forced me to really reflect on what's really important in life, so that by the time I got to Stanford, I was then able to actually focus my energies on those things and really grow and develop and ask for help on all that stuff. And I think as much as it's not tips per se, I would rather just say, you know, your application is yours, right? So this is your opportunity, you know, to Make it what you what you believe you want it to be. So yeah, that's the main reflection that comes for me.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think my biggest surprise after school was how much I learned about myself. I didn't expect that to be what I got out of business school, amongst other things. And and I think there's also a question about, as an African, along the same lines, your application, how do you sort of position yourself? Really, the Stanford application is probably one of the toughest ones, but the best way to approach it is just say that you're writing this for yourself and not for Stanford, and just be brutally honest with what matters for you, and just lay it out there. And I think that the folks reading the applications can tell when you're trying to fit in some sort of a mold, rather than just be yourself.
Mm. Yeah, I definitely echo that too.
Yeah, I can just chime in here and say that across both the applications process and maybe my first few weeks here, what surprised me the most was how unique you are, but how common your uniqueness is. So simultaneously, you are your only copy, but when you meet other very exceptional people, you then realize you're challenged to maybe do better, but also be a little bit less, I'm looking for the perfect synonym for proud about your previous achievements, but I'd say a little bit more inflective about all of the other influences that helped you on your route or your route to or path towards success. So I'd say it's still surprising to me because I'm still getting to meet a lot of my classmates, and when I hear some of their stories, I am sometimes even moved to tears.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. We have a couple more questions. This one was specifically for Tayo, but I think given how many of you are now entrepreneurs, I think feel free to weigh in. The question was, did you work on PAGA while at the GSB? But I think we can also just address more broadly, what is it like to start something while in school, and what Stanford resources were most useful to you? And I will just insert a little bit here that, the GSB is a full-time 2-year program. So we want our students to be fully invested in being students, but obviously given, we're in the heart of the Valley and embryonic to entrepreneurship, and that's a huge part of what students are involved with.
Yeah, no, very much. No, I did not start PAGA while I was in school, actually. I started PAGA about 4 years later. But I actually tell people that if I were to go back, one thing I wish I did was either work on an idea while I was in school, or whether it was my idea or somebody else's idea, it didn't matter. And it didn't even matter whether I even go do that after school, or just working on it while I was in school, because it gave you, because I think it would have given me, and I saw some of my classmates doing it, it would have given me an opportunity to, really connect with other people in the ecosystem at Stanford. Outside of the business school, it would have given an opportunity to connect with people at the deep design school, at some of the venture capital community, etc. So I would have taken that opportunity. It is very hard to run a business while you're in school. One of our classmates did it successfully. His company, OkCupid, was on the East Coast of the US, and he was up at 5 a.m. every day on calls, and then get ready for class. But it's a lot of diligence to really, really do that. So I wouldn't suggest that, right? Like, it's tough to do it. Yeah.
Does anyone else want to chime in? There's a related question about Startup Garage. I'm not sure if anyone took that course. All right, no worries.
No,
So I
should go ahead.
So I could chime in. So I think I'm a bit different to, I guess, most people that were in my class. But I went into the GSB knowing exactly what I wanted to do afterwards. So my experience felt like it was very targeted and tailored towards kind of helping me get there. So I knew I wanted to do something in the dairy sector, but I didn't really know exactly what that would look like. So I kind of used my classes to explore different models, to explore different ideas, and just just answering the question around Startup Garage. I decided not to do Startup Garage because I felt that it wasn't suited for ideas that were based far away. So a lot of Startup Garage requires you to do a lot of user interviews, prototype testing, and if your idea is requiring operations and deployment in an African country, it's kind of hard with the time difference and everything else to be able to do all of those things effectively. So I didn't think that I would be able to kind of have as rich an experience doing Startup Garage, and it probably would get a bit frustrating not being able to kind of hit some of those milestones that were required from the class. But what I did do is I spent a lot of time with the Center for Social Innovation, being able to engage with, so they were able to connect me with other entrepreneurs on the continent that are working on similar ideas. And that really helped to be able to have some of that experience, but getting them connected and having the CSI team working with me through my ideas. It was different, but I think what I would say is that you just curate your own experience. You know what you need, you know what you're looking for, the resources are there at the GSB. So I think keeping an open mind and knowing that sometimes you might have to dig a little deeper to figure out where you're going to get that support, or how you can kind of combine different classes or opportunities to be able to get that same experience that you would get. So I think I was able to effectively do it without necessarily taking Startup Garage, but being able to combine different classes to be able to give me some of those experiences and opportunities to testing.
Yeah. Yeah, if I can also add my perspective, and I echo a lot of what also has been said. I think the big impact for me is that because I started my business, I think it was within 2 years of actually finishing the MBA. So the difference for me was that it actually accelerated just how soon I felt ready to actually start my own business. And I haven't looked back ever since. If anything, we've been growing. I've grown the team over time and also the client base. So for me, I think the difference is I always knew that I wanted to have my own business one day. But I didn't think that it would happen anytime in the next near future. And literally after the Stanford experience, I mean, it was quick. I mean, I was in my 20s, but I was like, why not? And, you know, it gave me the confidence. I mean, we work with, you know, executives and CEOs, helping them with their business problems. But the more of the story is that I don't think I would have had that confidence that, you know, we could deliver that difference, but it gave me that confidence. And I think also, I echo what Aisha was saying, to say Startup Garage is one example, but there's really different ways that you actually get to experience, right? You know, what it means to be involved in the business, or to be part of a startup, etc., or also to be part of even a developing business that's already there. And there's so many different courses that you can then pick which angle you want to come from, for example, and then learn from that perspective and really, really lean from there. I think the other thing that's important is that there's just so many opportunities at Stanford. There's so many different things that you can do with your time. So it's really, really important to get to a point where you learn to prioritize when you get there, because you can't do everything. You know, someone like me, for example, I already had a business undergrad. So I knew that the thing that I wasn't going to be focusing on too much is the academic side of the business content. But I loved the other content, particularly around leadership. It's something that's close to my heart. And, you know, had a chance to do classes, we call it across the street, I believe, and at the broader business school, you know, because I'm actually quite very, very creative. I mean, I'm a fan of the arts and stuff. A lot of me know me from the public speaking and stuff, the talks that I've given. But one of the things I did at business school, because I was able to do classes across the street, is I did vocals. You know, I did a vocals class at the music school. I did an advanced movements class at the acting school. I did a meditation and mindfulness class at the School of Medicine. Things that normally I wouldn't have time for if I ended up spending my time saying, I want to just focus on, you know, startup this and startup that, etc. So I think it's that, to say there's so much to do. And also your classmates are so amazing that you actually want to spend a lot of time with them. And that's, for me, is where I spend a lot of time, really just getting to know them, connecting with them. And today it's people that I feel like I can call family. And that wouldn't have happened if I didn't make sure that I make time available to be able to do that.
Awesome. Thank you. So we have about 5 minutes left. So I think this is going to be the last question. And I think it's a really good one to end on. Mohamedou is asking this great question to discuss a little bit further on how Stanford prepared you to tackle challenges and opportunities in Africa. So specifically, can you give any examples of classes or experience that equipped you in navigating African markets or the geopolitical landscape? So just kind of any sort of specifics around your Stanford experience and how it applied to your careers in Africa now.
I got one, but I don't know if others want to go first. Ron, it sounds like you want to go. You want to go first.
I think we should go by the most recent to backwards.
I've been living it for 11 years. I don't know. You go first.
Josh, feel free to kick it off. Josh, if you have an answer for something Africa specific, and then we'll go backwards.
So I do intend to return to the continent in the not too distant future. I am very heartened by the experiences of those that have made the move very successfully. I think the exact question, please help me, Saba, is what exactly about the Stanford experience makes that move successful, right?
Yeah, the specific question was, could you discuss further on how Stanford prepared you to tackle challenges and opportunities in Africa?
Oh, that's perfect. So, where do I begin? So Tayo spoke earlier about the pedagogy, and I think it's a problem-solving, focused pedagogy, and it combines the best of all worlds, both experiential as well as well, let's call it Socratic, or if you want a lot more pedagogic learning. The issue is that because the Stanford experience is structured into two: the first year, which gives you the general management base, and then the second year, which allows you to basically tailor your experience. You find out that you are able to solve problems that maybe need you to be more entrepreneurial and creative in approach, but also sometimes more structured and a lot more bureaucratic or sequential in your approach. So I think that the fact that there's this diversity of classes that employs many different pedagogic methods and highlights each and, shall we say, strengths and weaknesses of many different approaches to doing things, makes you a better problem solver, even if sometimes you don't even know that it is happening to you. Secondly, because there's so much intentionality about creating a community and, shall we say, harnessing the strengths of your classmates, when you listen to a lot of the problems they have tackled, both professionally and personally, you begin to realize that there's nothing new under the sun. Basically, the biggest issue will then be how to adapt your learnings, because, well, context it's strategy for launch. You can't use a one-size-fits-all, what is it called, solution everywhere you go. You then begin to think how you're going to adapt to the solutions they tried and failed or succeeded at whatever problems you are trying to solve. More specifically, I've noticed, for example, as co-president of the Africa Business Club, that we've had a lot of people reaching out and saying, oh, we don't know if many of your classmates are interested in maybe doing a small project, helping a small organization here think through or walk through a problem. Now, we have not started anything along those lines, but I can see how that exposes you to problems on the continent, even while as a student here, where you're flexing those muscles that you are beginning to develop in all of the leadership and all of the strategy and all of the technical classes here. And lastly, the amazing network that you have access to, both with students who are on campus with you and alumni who are always welcoming to help you. I think that is a vast resource that if you throw at any problem, even Africa-sized problems, eventually you're going to be able to whittle them down.
Thanks, Josh.
I think just to piggyback a bit on what Josh said around like the problem-solving mindset, I think one of the things that Stanford does is kind of make you embrace trying things out, irrespective of whether you're going to fail or not, right? So it's a mindset of going for it, but not necessarily waiting till everything's perfectly aligned before you go for it. And not necessarily shooting for success, but shooting for that experience of learning and trying something out and learning from it and then iterating afterwards. I think that in the African context, there are so many challenges that you'll end up facing. And as much as you think you know what those are, you keep getting curveballs thrown at you. And I think what Stanford has done is helped, at least for me, embrace the fact that that is just part of the journey. And I'm able to also be introspective and not necessarily see it as my individual failure, but just this is just what happens. And it's the question of what do you do afterwards, right? It's going to happen. So it's more about what are the next steps you take to think about the problem and think about creative solutions to solve it.
Yeah. If I can add to that, I think from my perspective, it really just pushed me to think, and actually aspire to solve things in a way that's a little bit more global. I think one of the challenges of being in the African continent is that sometimes, you think you've created the best solution and it's just best right now. It's best maybe in this town or in this city or maybe even in your country. And right now, I mean, even the lens at which I look at my business now, anything we do, my lens is global. Like we're aiming to be the best in the world at what we do. And I wouldn't have that lens if I wasn't in an environment like Stanford, where it basically said, look, you can be at the best, whatever you want to be in a global space. So it also opened up a little bit my mind in terms of possibilities and what can be done from an African context, because sometimes we limit ourselves saying, but there's this issue, there's this issue. I learned to drop a lot of excuses and I just say, you know what? Actually, I guess it's possible. I think the other thing that it really helped me with is actually just working on these blind spots. I mean, we have these blind spots. If you think of the history, right, of the oppression and all our complicated history as a continent in general, I mean, particularly coming out of South Africa. And when I was at Stanford, it was probably one of the first times in my life that I actually got to really see who I am and what's my identity beyond some of the labels that, are so strongly put by society on us in terms of what you can achieve as, call it a person of color or as a woman or as an African, it doesn't matter. And all these limiting beliefs, I mean, once you actually eradicate the impact of all those blind spots, it's really amazing what your potential can truly become. And then the last thing for me was this attitude of actually believing that you can solve the problem. It doesn't matter how big the problem is. We also have this mindset of wanting, there's a lot of things that we can actually change and really make a big difference on. And I see a lot of people, also African-born talent, sort of feeling defeated, and they say, no, I'm not going to do this. It's too late. You know, the politicians are not doing enough. And I think it really shifted my mindset to say, but yes, we can fix it. And why don't you try and fix it? Even if it's in your own little way, if it's your own big way. And it's not a coincidence that if you look at some of the businesses that Stanford alumni have actually started across the continent and also across different industries, it's phenomenal impact. And at the end of the day, I can see that seed within them, myself included, where it just says, you know what? I think I can do it. And let me go try. And if I fail, who cares? But if it works, the impact is phenomenal. And that's something for me that stood out when I look at coming from the African continent.
I'll go next, Tayo, if you don't mind. So a class that has really helped me in my 12 years working on across the continent was a class we took called Managing with Power. And this was basically a class about influence in organizations and politics. And it's all about, I mean, a key part about Africa is implementation, as we all know it. You may have the best idea. How do you get it done? And some of that implementation hits hurdles which are either politically driven or, so how do you look at a situation and basically kind of like a chess match, look at the whole board and try to figure out the strategies, what are the different touch points? Who are the different stakeholders? What are their interests? How do you approach this party and that party to get something unlocked? A lot of Africa, the complexity of our continent, for example, if you compare it with Asia as an example, and we do a lot of business in Asia, it's just getting through some just roadblocks, knocking things down and getting things done. And that class was very, very good at that and really making you to think strategically on how to get things done. And we being investors on the continent have seen this in many, many, many ways. One of our first investment that we've ever made on the continent was an investment in MTN Nigeria, which most of you guys may know. We made an investment in 2008. Obviously amazing company, largest mobile phone provider on the continent, MTN, but Nigeria being the best part of MTN. And over the years, we're still invested in the company, we got hit by a $5 billion fine by the government of Nigeria. We then got hit with a $2 billion fine for taxes. So just trying to figure out how do you get this company to get through these issues and who are the different people we could use, what is the real laying out what is happening. And this is just not unique to MTN, for example. There are many other private equity firms run companies on the continent where this is the case. And it's really understanding who the stakeholders are, who the players are, and how do we get things done, obviously in an ethical way, but how do you find ways to get things done? And I think that class was really instrumental in that.
Yeah, I'll just piggyback on that and say another class that I found really helpful along similar lines, a strategy beyond markets, and it really helps you think about the non-market things that Ron was talking about. And it's actually been fun to go back and teach, that class as well. Now, haven't experienced it for a while, but just sort of how do you think about the regulators? How do you think about different market-driven actors in your business? But one thing I will also say, fundamentally, I've been also really, I guess not surprised, but just, really want to draw out that business is business almost everywhere. Like most part, doing business in the US, the things you will face as the entrepreneur, different scales of like things and maybe different key points, but you would find you're going to face the same sort of struggles in Africa, somewhere else. And then there's some unique things, of course, but right now I'm in a peer group of some entrepreneurs from, we're in 4 continents. And when we meet and talk, it's, we're facing the same sets of things. How do I, issues with my board or handling my board, my investors, my team, like these are all things about business. And that's why I would actually say that you would learn, again, from any of the top schools, you're going to get a great education. I think then it's about thinking about where do I fit in, and where am I going to get all the other things that help, right? And I think the tight-knit nature of the GSB, because it's a small class, really stands out, right? This is a family for life. Just the same way as if I was saying, she was talking to a classmate in the US today. I've been on chat all day with a classmate in Hong Kong who, came to Nigeria last year, invested in my business. And you're seeing more and more interest from non-Africans on the African continent. Last December, 130 GSB students landed in Lagos, right? It was just like amazing to see it, right? From all over the world. And so there's a lot of interest on students as well, to the future of this continent. So I think that bodes well for the business school down the line, and for those of you in school now. So Joshua, I'm really envious of you, actually.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for helping bring the GSB to life. I'm so appreciative. I feel like you guys are all living the stories that you're telling about the GSB by giving your time back to us. It's kind of a testament to what being a student or an alum at the GSB actually looks like.